Welcome. Today we will be discussing Diversity Among African American People by Brandon Smith. The barriers of African American people have been a devastating force in African American life. Um, I remember discrimination as far as I can remember. I remember the lack of education. I remember the lack of resources. I remember the lack of pride. In this lecture, we will be covering history of diversity, understanding history, and diversity awareness. In this lecture review, the history of barriers among African American people has been proven by multiple sources. The diversity between African Americans and Caucasian people can be analyzed by historic facts. This cultural view inside the obstacles of the so-called black man in America leaves the question that is unanswered. What is the real definition of freedom, justice, and equality? In this exercise, we will evaluate diversity, mental health, and solutions to the problem. And with the evaluation, the research will provide an illustration of the hardship within African American culture. In an article titled How Gender and Race Stereotypes Impact the Advancement of Scholars in STEAM, impacts the advancement of scholars by investigating the bias between men and women and other racial biases. The article states that the way we communicate with different cultures and genders create the meaning for diversity. The ability to be aware of others and other cultures fascinates and symbolic meaning for diverse situations. And with the proper communication, one can manage his or her conflicts. In America, there are many inequalities in this idea of freedom. The different shifts between culture groups such as blacks and whites. The main reckoning of this topic was to dissect the barriers of the African American public, such as education, culture, and poverty. The act of slavery in African American history has been documented. In this article, Slavery, an excerpt from The God of the Bible, the author explains how African American slaves used religion to escape from their horrifying reality. The article goes on to say that the most magnificent drama in the last 1,000 years of human history is the transportation of 10 million human beings out of the dark beauty of their mother continent into the newfound El Dorado of the West. The toughest thing I ever did in America was remain black. The skin of the original people keeps Western America striving to find ways to cope with the pain of slavery. Even though we have been dealt a bad deal, hope is still envisioned in our heads. It is the breath that we take that makes us keep on breathing. It is the sun that keeps shining that makes us believe in God. The black man has faced diversity for over 400 years and it has been documented in historic, peer-reviewed articles. This theme of invisibility in the post-war struggle against prejudice in the United States shows exactly how discrimination in America is overlooked. The horrific control of seeing human beings as non-existent or absent make these individuals invisible. The theme of invisibility goes on to describe irrational prejudice about many immigrants arriving from other countries. It also describes how individuals receive treatment like a phenomenon instead of a person. In the article Just Laws, Unjust Laws, and Theomoral Responsibility, the author explains the importance in just laws and unjust laws. These laws often change in various social situations. The way a black man is treated may be dissimilar from the way a white American gets handled, especially if an African American individual is stopped by a white police officer. This is absolutely true. An example of that in my life, um, what happened around 1993. I remember going to jail for selling crack cocaine at the time, and it was my first offense, and I ended up getting 5 years. And I remember white males going up there to see the judge, and them having their first offense, but they would get probation. And some of the guys in the cell would say that it was just Commonwealth of Kentucky, but to me, it was racism. The International Communication Journal summarizes the understanding of global culture by examining the categories of capitalism, modernism, and nationalism. The assumption of an economic landscape seems to help outline the mixture of diversity in one's planet. These examples of global culture point towards personal culture and the consumption between our modern and postmodern worlds. The theme of invisibility in the post-war struggle against prejudice in the United States conveys the involvement of discrimination within African American men in America. The restriction of freedom is showcased in our nation's history. It also gives birth to the rejuvenated black man in America, and these evaluations also recognize the barriers in our individual worlds. The conscious perception piece contains the mindfulness of men and women. The selective perception of one's culture and beliefs seem to enhance distorted opinions that cause social barriers between age, gender, and religion. This ability to have an awareness of one's self perception creates the treasures of opportunity and diversity. These barriers of social brain power must be overcome. The example of scaling up to build the peace among those who see differently demonstrates social learning as a reenactment of life's previous move. It also looks at areas that are scalable, like social affliction and dissemination, to strengthen organizations across the world. In the article, Can We Reduce Our Implicit Prejudice Towards Persons with Disabilities? The author examines the discrimination towards people with disabilities in society. This article debates social tactics to reduce prejudice towards people with disabilities. In this situation, the ability to apply skin color as a disability helps us understand the differences between the so called norm and its routine. The mental health care among blacks in America are often overlooked. Confronting racism and constructing solutions examines mental health care among African Americans. The article goes on to discuss racism and discrimination as a cause of multiple illnesses such as hypertension, high blood pressure, and PTSD. There should not be as much discrimination as it is in this world. The pride of being black is hard because the 400 years of slavery is always tormented on the black man's conscience. The color of the skin darkens the day of the Western man. Why did God make this happen? Why do the people see what they see? And why do the people hear what they hear? One may never know, but for a fact, the horrifying obstacles of discrimination is present in America.